Don't want me.
Do you need a website or a webmaster for your business or hobby? A wordsmith for a research paper or for a script, an article, or for a language translator? Do you need an audio or visual project created or edited? Contact K-Wave 6 Productions at www.kwave6productions.tk for all your website, writing, audio, and visual needs. Our rates are competitive and our services are excellent. That's K-Wave 6 Productions at www.kwave6productions.tk or email us at info@kwave6productions.tk.
Hello and welcome to today's show. Today I have a returning guest who's going to introduce us to and share with us some things about his second book. My guest is Richard Steinitz, who is the author of Kaplan's Quest. It is a great honor for me to have him back, and he's so much fun and so interesting to have here. So without any further ado, welcome back to the show, Richard.
Thank you, Kirk. Great to be here again. As Kirk was so gracious to say, I am the author of a new book, Kaplan's Quest. And I thought rather than doing a lot of explaining at the beginning, I would just read a few pages, the first chapter of the book, and it will give you an idea what it's all about. So if you don't mind and everybody's ready, here we go. This is Chapter 1, Israel 2004. Uncle Samuel, as he was known in my immediate family, was an integral part of my childhood, even though I never knew him. And he was presumed to have been dead for many years already. He was actually my great-uncle. I was given his name, Shmuel. Shmuel is the Hebrew version of Samuel. Shmulik is the diminutive nickname. And from an early age, heard stories of his athletic prowess and saw his picture prominently displayed in our house, dressed in his athletic gear. He had been a champion shot putter in the Young Maccabi's sports club in Berlin, had even taken part in the second Maccabi games in 1935 in Tel Aviv, and for some unfathomable reason had returned to Berlin at the end of the games. Oh, sorry about that. My grandfather, Ethan Kaplan, Samuel's fraternal twin brother, had accompanied the Maccabi Hatzair team to Palestine as a journalist, but had chosen to stay and make his home in Jerusalem, where he met my grandmother, who was also from a German Jewish family. Their elder brother, Nathan Kaplan, had left Germany already in 1934, having seen the way things were going and having understood earlier than the rest of the family that it was time to get out. He had somehow managed to get an immigrant visa for Canada, though the Canadians were not very helpful about letting Jewish refugees in, to say the least, and went to live in Montreal. My great-grandparents, the parents of the three brothers, had both died in the Theresienstadt concentration camp, and we had Red Cross certificates to prove it. The contradictory character of the Yekim, as the German Jews who managed to escape the Holocaust are locally known, was well in evidence in our home. On one hand, no German-made products were ever bought, including cars. No one would ever travel to Germany unless forced to by circumstance. Government service was forgivable, business dealings were frowned upon. And no chance was ever missed at bad-mouthing the German people, dead or alive, or the present German government. On the other hand, the mother tongue in my parents' house was German. Both my father and my mother were children of German immigrants, and the first language they knew and learned was German. It was only natural for them to speak German amongst themselves, especially as a way of communicating so that the children didn't understand what they were saying. We, my sister Naomi and I, learned a basic level of German at an early age in self-defense. In our family, and I dare say in most other German immigrant households, culture was considered a German monopoly. No one composed classical music of any value except for German composers. Goethe was the greatest writer in history, far better than Shakespeare or Tolstoy, with Schiller coming in a close second. And the German countryside was the earthly reflection of the Garden of Eden. It was an unspoken assumption in our house that I would become an athlete, and so it was. I joined the local Hapoel sports club in our neighborhood at the age of 8, and after trying various sports, decided on wrestling. Not exactly what Uncle Samuel had done, but close enough. My parents and grandparents came to every meet, every competition, and would shout encouragement from the side. Oma and Opa in German, my parents in Hebrew. This continued for years, through high school and up until the start of my military service. I wasn't, however, good enough to become an exceptional athlete and spend my 3 years wrestling for the Israeli Defense Forces team, so I went along with some of my high school friends and served in the artillery. My wrestler's arm muscles came in very handy, though, when carrying artillery shells that weighed upwards of 45 kilograms each. The Army, however, has a way of changing things for better and for worse. And by the time I had finished my 3 years in Olive Green, wrestling was no longer the focus of my life. I had decided to study history and was accepted at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Perhaps because of my family background, I concentrated on the period between the two world wars. And long before the time came for me to do a master's thesis, I knew exactly what it would be on. As I said before, I never knew my Uncle Samuel. He had returned to Berlin after the Maccabi Games in 1935, and for a few years had corresponded with my grandfather. But with the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, this correspondence came to an end. My grandfather spent the war years working for the British Army's spokesman's office in Jerusalem, putting his journalistic talents to use in the war effort. After the war, he tried to trace his brother, and through the Red Cross managed to find some of his old neighbors in what had remained of Berlin. Their story was that Samuel had been picked up in late 1938, interrogated, and released. He managed to live an almost normal life for the next 2 years or so, but soon after the occupation of France, he disappeared. From one day to the next, with no warning or visible visit by the police or the Gestapo, he had simply vanished. It was assumed that he had been transported to one of the concentration camps, but no trace in any of the Germans' meticulous records was ever found. It was as if he had been snatched by aliens. Throughout the early 50s, my grandfather kept trying to find him, but soon after the Sinai campaign in 1956, he gave up. Probably he just wearied of the alternating hope and pain, accepted the fact that his brother was dead and gone, and went on with his life. He never gave up telling me stories of his brother, though, how much I looked like him, and how I should be an athlete in his memory. My dark curly hair and green eyes were apparently a close match to Uncle Samuel's, as was my stocky build. Years before I ever started studying history in earnest, I had already dreamed of finding out what exactly happened to my Uncle Samuel. So when I began thinking of doing my master's thesis, I knew immediately what the subject would be. The last years of the Jewish community in Berlin, and specifically the disappearance and unknown fate of my uncle. The history department at the Mount Scopus campus of the University in Jerusalem has a great staff that specializes in that period, with lecturers from all over the world, including Germany, and I got to know most of them personally. I started work on the research even before I finished my BA in European history, and spent long hours at the National Library and at the library of the Yad Vashem Memorial Museum for the 6 million Jews that had been murdered by the Nazis, digging up what little information there was. The Maccabi Museum also had some material, especially on the Maccabi Hatzair organization and the Maccabi Games. On a visit there, I even discovered a photograph of my uncle in the gallery, and I probably needed to return to the museum to dig deeper, but it was not a priority and it would have to wait. By the spring of 2004, I had done just about all I could in Jerusalem. My coursework was finished, and I exhausted the resources for my research that were available to me there. Despite my misgivings and instinctive revulsion at the idea, I knew it was time for me to go to Berlin. No one in the family had ever been to Germany since the war, and it was a matter of family honor never to buy any German products. I knew that my family and especially my grandparents would not take kindly to the idea of my traveling to that cursed country. But I knew that only there would I have any chance of finding the answers to the questions I was asking in my thesis and that I had been asking for most of my life. The family accepted my decision with great misgivings, but understood that I needed to live my own life and do my own thing. I think that's a good place to stop. Got to leave something to the imagination.
Okay, Richard, you're going to take a break here, so let me ask you a question here, as I'm listening with great interest to your story here, but I can't help but asking, how much of this story is written on or based on fact, i.e. truth, and how much is fiction? It is very interesting, and I'm just curious, possibly even our listeners are curious, how much of this is truth and how much is fiction?
Completely legitimate question. The specifics, the athletics, the Maccabi Hatzair, the missing uncle, all this is fiction. That's the product of my fertile and overactive imagination. The background is pretty close to the truth. My parents, like this guy's parents and grandparents, were German Jews. The attitudes, the reluctance and resistance to German products, to traveling to Germany, to having anything to do with Germany, are exactly how I grew up. And again, as I said, fairly common, if not in the majority of German Jewish households here in Israel. I'll give you an example. When I was new to the country, about 2 or 3 years in, I bought myself a VW Beetle, 1970, 71, something like that, because it was about all I could afford. And on more than one occasion, I was shouted at, screamed at, spat upon by people who thought that buying a German car was beyond the pale. I think today, when I'm 60-something, I understand that perhaps a bit better than I did when I was 23. But that was very much the atmosphere. Of the rest of the book, there are parts that are taken straight from personal experience, from personal memory, from family life, things like that. But obviously it's a novel. And like I said, it's fiction. Right? But I love putting in little bits of real life reality. And so just as an example, our young hero, Samuel, goes to Berlin and he goes looking for where his uncle's family lived. And he finds the house, and I give it a street address. And that street address was the address of my grandparents' house. So, yeah.
That's very interesting, Richard. With that, we're going to take our first break. So we ask that you stay with us, and we'll return right after this break with our guest today, Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest, and we'll continue the interview from there. So we'll see you soon. Be right back.
Hi, Hi, this is Megan Serleski, author of Who Am I? How My Daughter Taught Me to Let Go and Live Again. And I am on K-Wave 6 Radio.
Hi, this is Pat Kammer, author of Love's Voice Changes You, Book 1. And I now have Book 2, which is called Hello Awesome, Message from Spirit in Pat's Patters. Buy your book from Amazon.com.
Hello, welcome to K-Wave 6 Radio with Kirk Spencer. My name is Troy Matheson. I am a polymath and adventurer in arts and sciences, currently working with good people at newearthnation.org. I highly encourage you to check out that website. We're doing incredible things there. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. Today my guest is Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest. I just want to get into asking a quick question here. Richard, how did you get started into Kaplan's Quest, and what was your inspirations?
Okay. Several things involved here. Number one, once I had finished Murder Over the Border, I took a break because it had been a long, hard slog. But writing books, I suppose, is like anything else, any other hobby or thing that you really, really like to do. And once you've done one, you want to do another one. So it took me a while, probably a year or so at least, till I got around to starting a new book. And then, since I had never done any of this before when I was young, I had no background in creative, I had never taken a course in creative. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I thought, for the fun of it, more as an exercise than anything else, I would try writing something in the first person rather than the third person. Big difference between writing third person, which is narrative. He did what you do, he did this, and last year he did that, and his uncle did this, and down the street this is happening. It's really easy to bring in information. When you're writing in first person, it's I did this and I did that, but how do I bring in information from the past, from a different track that has nothing to do with the narrator, the first person narrator? And it's very, 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 very different, and it's very, very difficult when you're used to writing third person, which is what most people write. And so it took me, first of all, it took me quite a while to get into the first person writing mode. And about halfway into the book, I got really stuck because I needed to bring in a lot of information from the past, from things that happened to this guy's uncle when he disappeared. And it obviously wasn't stuff that was written down in the book that he could read or something. It wasn't that sort of thing. So I had a really hard time, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what to do and how to do it. And anybody that reads the book now will see this. I came up with the idea of there being a diary written by someone, another one of the characters, and our hero Samuel and his cousin Jack sort of read the diary and thus bring in the information into the book. So that's just a technical thing, how I did it. But it was hard in the beginning, and then it became challenging, and in the end it became fun. Now, the kernel, the idea for the book is something really silly and weird and almost irrelevant. I had read at the age of 10 or so a children's mystery called The Mystery of Mont Saint-Michel. And I don't know how great a book it was, but it stuck in my mind for many, many years. It drove me to go visit Mont Saint-Michel in France when I was there in 1967. And I always thought of it as the idea for a story. And when I started writing the book, something that happened in Mont Saint-Michel was the kernel, the basis for the story. By the end of the book, it turns into a very, very minor, almost irrelevant point, but it's what got me going. I suppose I'm different from many other writers in that they map out a book before writing it, make an outline or a chart saying it's going to go from A to B to C to D, and this is how the story will progress. When I start writing, I have no idea where I'm going. And I just sort of let my mind wander and take it someplace. And then it happens quite often that I sort of paint myself into a corner. I get to a point where I said, oh my God, there's no way out of this. This is ridiculous. It's totally disconnected from what I'm trying to do. What am I going to do? And, well, less computers. I just take a huge block of text, block it out, and hit the delete button and start all over again.
Yeah, I can imagine. That can be frustrating at times.
Yeah. It's not an easy job. Us writers earn our money.
Well, you're telling us about how you got your ideas, but if I remember correctly, you went to university in Paris?
No, I went to university in Buffalo, New York. But I took a semester off, January to June 1967. Let's put it this way. I never was the world's greatest student. I was more at university in order to stay out of the clutches of Uncle Sam rather than to get an education. And so I wasn't doing very great, to put it mildly. I'm not the studious type, and I find sitting in a lecture hall difficult, listening to somebody speak. I'm fine, as you've noticed, I'm fine having a conversation with somebody. But listening to somebody go on for an hour on a subject matter that does or doesn't interest me is very difficult for me. I didn't do great at university. And at the end of 66, I decided that I needed a break. And I twisted my parents' arms for a change and got them to agree that I would spend a semester in France, ostensibly to learn to speak French better. Basically, I went and had a really great time. It's a great place, Paris, I got to tell you. Yeah. Anyhow, so at the end of that semester in June of 67, the Six-Day War here in Israel happened. And I had planned on coming for a visit after that semester in any case because I have loads of family here and I wanted to see the country and et cetera, et cetera. So I came and I spent 3 weeks here, July of 67, and I was smitten. I fell in love with the country more or less from the minute I arrived. I'm not quite sure why, but that was the end result. For better or for worse, I had a ticket back. So I went back to the States and did another year at university. I won't say studying because I didn't do much of that. This was 1967, 68. All the student protests against the Vietnam War were building up. Buffalo was no different from any other university campus. There was a lot of that going on. And I very, very soon decided that, no, this isn't for me. I want to go back to Israel. So I did.
So tell us, how long have you been living in Israel?
I've been here more or less ever since. Yeah, occasional breaks, but yeah.
Okay, we've learned something about you, Richard. Now, if you don't mind me asking, tell us a little something about your early life, say from childhood, or even something about your father. I think you were talking about off air that he was a pretty good influence for you in your early years.
My father was an industrial physicist. I don't think he enjoyed his job very much, but it food on the table. And he used to say his dream job was to be a street sweeper. And why on earth would you want to do it? He said it was the only job he could think of where he would have enough time to think. And yeah, there's something to that.
Yeah, there's something to what your father was thinking about. When I was younger, I used to think about working as a janitor in some industrial building or even as a school janitor, just so I could basically think and just have peace because I got tired of being micromanaged in most of the jobs that I had before that, even as a supervisor, when I was a supervisor. But being a janitor or street sweeper is just, here, go do this and do it well, and that's all they really care about. Anyhow, since your father didn't do that, I didn't do that, obviously you didn't do that, so yeah, it was a thought, but yeah, we're not going to go that, at least not now. But now we're at the midpoint of the show. We're going to take our half-hour break, and we ask that you stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dr. Nick Leroy, and you're listening to WWII Radio with its host, Kirk Spencer. I'm a holistic physician. I specialize in women's health, breast thermography, the alternative treatment of cervical dysplasia, and gastrointestinal disorders. And you can find me at drnick.net.
Hi, this is Amy Young of JSJ Phone. We are providers of junior iPhone, iPad, iPod, also Samsung, Sony, Nokia parts and accessories at very good quality and low prices. We sell to individuals, and companies have 3 to 5 days delivery time by DHL or UPS. We do delivery in 24 hours after payment confirmed. For more information, see our website www.jsjphone.com www.jsjphone.com. Contact me Amy Young mailbox emy@jsjphone.com or by phone 0086 134 186969395, by Skype emy.yang2012.
Are you ready to put an end to thinking about how you wish it were and take action? Take this step to find out more by going to coachingbyria.com. And you can receive your free consultation session with Coach Ria. Coach Ria is a certified professional life coach with a passion to help make the difference in the world.
Aloha from Maui, Hawaii. This is Carrie Gray of My Green Insurance at mygreeninsurance.com. Thank you for joining us. We're the first co-op for alternative medicine health coverage. You're listening to us on kwave6radio.tk. Aloha!
And welcome back to the show. Today my guest is Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest. And just before the break, we were talking about, or Richard was talking about his father. and what his father had been doing, an industrial physicist, and how he just wanted to have a simple job as a street sweeper, to just be able to think. So, with that being understood, Richard, you wanted to continue on from there.
Yeah. Well, my father wasn't really commercially minded. I mean, he had a job, and he had a good job, and he provided for his family well, but it wasn't, this wasn't his thing. He was a real intellectual, cerebral person, and he liked to think. And working at his job, he would come home and he'd be dead tired, and he'd have dinner and more or less go to sleep. So he didn't have enough time to do what he wanted to do, was to think and, I don't know, philosophize or whatever. We didn't have enough of a close relationship so that I would actually know what he wanted to think about. But that's what he would say. He wanted to be a street sweeper. It was always good for a giggle in the house, but I understand him again more today than I did then. Modern corporate life is not conducive to, certainly not to thinking, and not to a lot of other things. Right? So, yeah.
So how do you see or compare your father's life and desires to want to think versus just to have a job and to exist to earn money only?
Oh, dear. Oh, God. There's no answer to that. I think, and I get, you've caught me really off guard, so I'm shooting from the hip here. I think that an awful lot of modern youngsters have little on their mind other than making it commercially, financially, so that they can have another vacation in Aspen or buy a new car or things like this. It's not how we were brought up. In our time, in the olden days, I think you were more encouraged to do things rather than to just earn money. But this is a really difficult question. But I'm going to take a liberty and move slightly to the side of this, because it's slightly connected to this. My brother, who I love dearly, and who I agree with on a lot of things, tends to call me in a joking manner, of course, a fascist militarist for this, because I think that military service is a wonderful thing. Now, that's an outrageous statement, I guess. But I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I don't think it's a wonderful thing to go out and kill people. God forbid. And as many people have said, the people who hate war the most are the generals. Well, maybe not the generals, but the colonels and the majors and the foot soldiers. But I think that military service is by itself a wonderful thing. And what does that mean? It means the idea that, first of all, a little bit of discipline is not a bad thing at all. I think learning to depend on your mates and know that they are depending on you for a lot of things, including their lives and your life, I think is a wonderful life lesson. And I think that if in many countries military service were made compulsory again, let's not call it military service. Let's call it national service. I think it would be good for society. Now, again, if you were to enlist every American teenager at the age of 18 into national service, you would have, God, I don't know, 20, 30 million people a year being called up, and nobody would know what to do with them. Certainly not the Army. The Army isn't in need of such huge quantities. But just think of a situation where you had, in the States, for example, there's something called the AmeriCorps. There is the Peace Corps. There are fire departments and police departments and hospitals and 1,000,001 organizations that really could use the services of young people who had to be there. And we're taught, this isn't something you can do overnight. You know, you can't change society from one day to the next and say, all right, as of tomorrow, we're having national service in a country that hasn't had national service for 40 years or something like that. You can't do it overnight. There's a lot of education involved. But just think that if every American kid at the age of 18, boys and girls, had to report for duty, they were given uniforms so that there's nobody stands out from the other one. Nobody's going to show up in his Armani t-shirt while the other guy's wearing blue jeans. And devote a year or 2 or 3 of your life to the service of, for lack of a better word, society. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's something that would change a lot of societies. I mean, in the 70s and the 80s, there was this movement, not only in America, but all over the world, of getting away from things like this. Oh, we don't want this. This isn't good for us. The kids don't want to do this. We don't know what to do with them. We don't need a big army, blah, 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 blah. But if this was part of your education from grade school up, you knew that this was going to happen. Because this is what, in Israel, everybody knows that at the age of 18, they're going to the army, right? If you knew that this was going to happen, you could plan that you weren't going to go to the military, but you were going to go to hospital service, or you were going to go to the forestry service, or whatever. And you spend a year or 2 or 3 serving your society in the company of other people from all sorts of walks of life, under less than ideal conditions, sleeping out, sleeping rough, working long shifts, 12 hours a day, rain and sun and snow and sleet like the old postman. I think this is character building. I think it's really, really important. In Israel, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of being able to do a lot of non-military national service. But it's becoming more and more common. And it's really, really good. And there's my philosophy for today. I was up on my soapbox, right? I'll tell you something else that I forgot to add on to my soapbox speech beforehand. Kids in Israel do 2 to 3 years army service in general. And when they come out, then if they want to, they go to university, study, stuff like this, which means that the average age of a beginning university student in Israel is usually 21, 22, sometimes even higher. You know what the difference is between a 22-year-old university student and an 18-year-old student? Yeah, I mean, they don't spend their time in frat houses, papering the house with toilet paper and throwing parties all night long. They're there to study, right? They're at university to study, right? College or university, sure, you should enjoy what you're doing. Don't get me wrong. You should really enjoy university life because that's what it's there for. But it shouldn't be this unending round of nonsense. You're there to get an education, and you're privileged in that you are there, that you got the chance, you got the opportunity to go to university and study. And it's not just because daddy's got the $100,000 to put you through university. It's because you're smart enough and you want to do something with it. And again, don't get me wrong. I don't think you need to know on day one what you're going to do. And I don't think you need to do this immediately when you finish your army. Take a year off, take 2 years off, do other stuff, try and figure out what your life is going to be. But don't spend 4 years at university being stoned out of your mind and running around half naked, you know?
Yeah, many of the youth of today seem to be looking forward to university to exceed financially. But beforehand, they seem to be, in general, looking to party their way through college.
No, exactly. Right. There's nothing wrong with being young. Quite the contrary, but use your young time to do young things, and then use your university time, your school time to do school time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think military service is very good. I mean, I learned a lot while I was in the military, and even it still works with me in my life today.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And again, it doesn't have to be military service. Not everybody's set out. Not everybody is suited for military service. But national service, yeah.
Yes, indeed. When it comes down to thinking about responsibility, but also thinking about, hey, I love the country that I'm in, there should be something that maybe on a national end, I don't know, something that gets a person to shore up some responsibility, learn some responsibility, and be able to participate in the welfare of your own country without having to be a politician. But at any rate, we're going to take our last break right now, and we ask that you stay tuned with us, and we'll return with Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest, and we'll return right after these commercials. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Kate McKay, the Mass Motivator at kate-mckay.com. You're tuned in to the amazing K-Wave 6 Radio.
Don't want be afraid.
Do you need a website or a webmaster for your business or hobby, a wordsmith for a research project, or for a script, an article, or even a language translator? Do you need an audio or visual project created or edited? Contact K-Wave 6 Productions at www.kwave6productions.tk for all of your website, writing, and audio and visual needs. Our rates are competitive and our services are excellent. That's K-Wave 6 Productions at www.kwave6productions.tk or email us at info@kwave6productions.tk.
Yes, this is Marlo Wright of mbymarlo.com, and you're listening to K-Wave 6 Radio.
And welcome back. We're in our final segment of today's show. My guest again is Richard Steinitz of Kaplan's Quest. As we're finishing up the show today, just wanted to ask Richard, do you have any final words or thoughts on your book?
Okay. Earlier in the show, I mentioned that I had used the whatever you want to call it, a means of bringing information in. I introduced a diary. And this diary was written by a German professor who, in one way or another, is a fairly major character in the story. But the whole, well, not the whole point, but a major reason for using this diary, not only to bring in the information, was that this man was insane. He was delusional. He was paranoid. He was totally disconnected from reality, from reality, from the rest of the world's concept of the world. And I thought this was a good vehicle to use because it showed at least one aspect of the insanity that was Nazi Germany from 33 to 45 of the last century. A lot of what went on there is seen as pure evil, and which it is, and which it was. And there are whole books written about the banality of evil in Germany in those years. But what I think is sort of neglected is the fact that a lot of it was real insanity, or at least in my humble opinion. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have a professional background in mental health or anything like that. But a lot of what went on was insane. Not only the fact of the evil, but, the philosophies, the ideas that went on. Some of these guys believed in aliens landing and moving pyramids and all sorts of stuff like this. And it's an underlying facet of this sick, evil society that I don't think people pay a lot of attention to. And I just thought it was a good use, a good way to show the insanity through this diary. And also it enabled me to bring in information that I needed to bring into the book. So, there you are.
From a man that has experienced and seen a lot in his lifetime, what do you see for our future? I mean, I see the world as good and evil, but as Einstein explained it or talked about it in his school days, when he was explaining hot and cold, we see hot and cold as opposites. What he ended up teaching or telling his teacher was that there is no such thing as cold. We only measure heat. In other words, when you get to absolute zero on the Kelvin scale, there's no movement even on the atomic scale. So how do you measure any further in heat in cold, or the lack of heat, than absolute zero? So we can only measure heat. The movement of an atom creates heat, so it's still at a very, very cold temperature for us as human beings, but we can only measure to the extent of whatever our instruments will tell us what is heat. So in that same vein, looking at good and evil, the way that I understand it, is there is good and there is the absence of good, just like there is heat and there is the absence of heat. How do you see it?
Oh, we don't have enough time for that. I got enough of, all right. If you had asked me 5 years ago which way was the world going, I would have been reasonably optimistic. I think the last few years have been a disappointment on that scale. I think recent events are scary as hell. I'm talking about things in our neighborhood, but things in our neighborhood tend to get out of the neighborhood and affect the rest of the world too. And I'm going to have to disagree with you about the good and evil, because I don't think it's only a lack of good. I think evil is a force on its own. I think there are, unfortunately, people who are intrinsically, basically, inherently evil. Things that we've seen in the last few days, last week or so, these executions in Iraq by the ISIS forces, terrorists, whatever you want to call them. This isn't the lack of good. A lack of good means that you haven't been taught properly. This is evil that is basic and inbred and unrepairable. I don't think that people like this can be repaired, can be re-educated to become normal, decent, positive individuals. These are people that are, for one reason or another, and we're not going to get into philosophy and religion now, whether this is a result of their religious upbringings, their mother not being nice enough to them or whatever, but these are people that are, this doesn't happen by chance. A good guy doesn't take a knife and cut off somebody's head. He's got to be really...
Yeah, okay. What I'm really getting at is I see people as being inherently good, but through education at home or through school or some other outside influence, people actually become, or if you will, they lose that good, which is what we call evil.
The thing is that evil people, and there are evil people, don't necessarily all come from the same background, from the same reasons, right? You can get a really sick, evil individual coming from a perfectly normal home, or you can get him coming from a really rotten, broken home, disgusting youth existence, whatever. But it's a flaw. You know what? Probably sometime 200 years from now, people will figure out how to diagnose evil from a chemical imbalance or something like this. In general, it's not something that's inherited. It's something that's so deep down inside. Like I said, I can't think of any way of diagnosing why people turn this way, but it's a problem, and look out, folks. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, this isn't something we can get into right now, so if you'd like to, we can continue this thought in another interview. What do you think?
I agree. With pleasure, Kirk. I will speak to you in October, probably, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Let's work on that one. But now I have to end the show, so let's get to the little announcements that I have to make at the end of the show, which is you can listen to our show on iTunes, Stitcher, podcast.com, RSS feed, and on YouTube. All media players are computer and smartphone friendly, and they're always free. You can subscribe to each player once you've chosen one for automatic updates when the shows air. So all you have to do is open your media player to our show, and you'll see our latest show on the dates that we tell you that they will be available. You can also subscribe or follow our blog for automatic updates to your email. You can also find us on Twitter and on Facebook, and if you need a link to that, you can also link to that straight from our homepage. And we ask also that you do support our advertisers if by chance you missed one of them, or you need to, or you want to see one of their websites very quickly. Go to our advertisers page on our website. If you have any suggestions and or comments about our show or for future shows, please contact us at info@kwave6, that's the number 6, radio.tk. That's info@kwave6radio.tk. Richard, you there?
I'm here, and thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you, Richard, for being here. We'll see all of you again very soon. And as always, take care and be well.
Thank you for being part of our audience. For more information about K-Wave6 Radio and the services we offer, go to www.kwave6radio.tk. Have a wonderful day.